After then, I had described about the respiration first part. Okay, that is the means breathing and gaseous exchange and transport. Today in the session, students, it is a very important topic for the respiration second part. It is also known as the cellular respiration. What happens into the cellular respiration? As into the definition, we shall know about that. The complex organic molecules, they gets broken down into the simpler one and they release the energy. In the respiration, we had also learned about the means complex molecule. That complex molecule, that is the glucose molecule. After intake of food, after the digestion, glucose molecule is produced inside our body. That glucose molecules is absorbed by the small intestine and finally it is reached into the, it get absorbed into the blood. From the blood, okay, it get transported in the form of dissolved form and finally it reach inside the cells where it participate into the respiration process. When we breathe, then what happens? The oxygen, it enters inside and through the diffusion and transportation process, finally it also reach inside the cell. So that oxygen which we breathe, which we intake through the breathing process, that involve into the respiration and release the energy after the birthing. So in this session, in the respiration part 2, which is also known as the cellular respiration, we shall learn about the respiratory processes. Now see, in this topic, what has given food, what we eat, that gets converted into the simple sugar. Here I am describing about the overview of the cellular respiration. It means the food into this one, the food which we eat, that is get digested into the simple sugar, that is known as the glucose. And from that glucose, after passing of these three process, these 3 to 4 process, what happens? Finally, we get the ATP molecules, and that ATP molecules, it is the energy molecule, and it help into the our physical as well as physiological activities. So, if we see the cellular respiration, it takes place means from the glucose after glycolysis is get converted into the pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid by the link reaction it get converts into the acetyl coenzyme A. Acetyl coenzyme A finally enter into the Krebs cycle, and by the reduction of the Krebs cycle means the product of the Krebs cycle, after the reducing they release the energy and water molecules. So here the 4 stages of aerobic respiration has given. What are the name of these stages of aerobic respiration? First stage is the glycolysis. In the glycolysis, breakdown of glucose occur, and that glycolysis takes place into the cytoplasm of the cell. Finally, into the glycolysis, 2 ATP molecules are produced, and these 2 ATP molecules, okay, they help into the production of energy. Linked to the equation, the glucose molecules means glucose. After the glycolysis, it gets broken down into the pyruvic acid, and in this process, no O2 is needed. Means oxygen that is not necessary for this process. So student, confirm that, okay, remember that glycolysis it never requires to the oxygen molecules. Now the second step, that is the link reaction. In the link reaction that occur into the matrix of mitochondria, here the no production of ATP occurs, and from the pyruvic acid, acetyl coenzyme A, okay, acetyl coenzyme A is formed, and that acetyl coenzyme A, after decarboxylation, what happens? It releases to the carbon dioxide, and no O2 is needed also here. It means here also no oxygen is necessary. Then the third reaction, that is known as the Krebs cycle. It is also known as the citric acid cycle. It occurs into the matrix of mitochondria. Here the 2 ATP is produced. And that ATP produced, here it also no need to the oxygen molecule is needed, right? Means here also not necessary, oxygen is not necessary for this cycle, Krebs cycle. But at the final last step, in the electron transport system, which takes place inside the which takes place on the Christie, and after the electron transport system, nearby 32 ATP, 32 ATP is produced, okay, and here O2 is needed. So oxygen finally needed into the electron transport system. So these three means these three, which one? These three one means 1, 2, and 3. These process they don't need about the oxygen. Only oxygen needed at the electron transport system. One thing is also here common. Here this one process means here, okay, not only the 32 ATP molecules are produced, there are the nearby 34 ATP is produced. How much? 34 ATP. Okay, 34 ATP is produced, right? So student clear, it is a clear that into the cellular process what happens means total 4 steps occur, and these 4 steps, okay, among these 4 steps, this one step, the electron transport system, fourth one step, that is too much important, and it takes place on the cristae of mitochondria, and O2 is necessary for here, okay, for the cellular respiration process. Now, into the next step, we shall discuss about the criteria, how does these processes take place. Student, now see about the cellular respiration, what are the sites? Glycolysis, link reaction, Krebs cycle, electron transport system. These are the 4 steps of the cellular respiration. Into the sum book, only the glycolysis has given, okay, Krebs cycle has given, and electron transport system has given. This one reaction, which reaction? The link reaction. This one link reaction that is given into the many of the book, but all the steps which involves into the cellular respiration, they are the glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport system. Link reaction is very small, and it helps into the entering of pyruvate molecule inside the mitochondria. That is very important. Okay, so link reaction is also important because without the link reaction, the pyruvic acid which produced from the glucose molecule after the glycolysis, it never happen, because the pyruvate molecule, this one pyruvate molecule, it does not directly enter inside the mitochondria without the link reaction. Now students see here, means the glycolysis, it takes place outside the mitochondria into the cytoplasm, and in the glycolysis glucose molecule gets converted into the pyruvic acid molecule. This pyruvic acid molecule, it finally enter passing through the both mitochondrial membrane through the decarboxylation process and reduction process, and form the acetyl coenzyme. This acetyl coenzyme, okay, after reaching into the matrix of mitochondria, what happens? It participates into the Krebs cycle, and Krebs cycle finally, the product of Krebs cycle, that is the NADH2, FADH2, and GTP, okay, all these they enter into the electron transport system which occur on the cristae of mitochondria, and finally the energy production occur. So these are the steps through which the means cellular respiration takes place. Now see the next step. What is the next step? Means how does the glycolysis takes place? Here the overall view of glycolysis that has given, as you know, as our discussion has given, the glycolysis takes place into the total 10 steps. So see the student, this is a very important flow chart of the glycolysis of respiration, and always remember that that is the very important step where the ATP is generated. So see the glucose molecules which we eat, okay, glucose molecules after the digestion, which is produced after the digestion, okay, this one glucose molecule, it in the presence of hexokinase enzyme, it get converted into the glucose 6 phosphate. Now this glucose 6 phosphate in the phosphoglucose isomerase enzyme, it gets converted into the fructose 6 phosphate, and fructose 6 phosphate in the phosphofructose kinase enzyme, it gets converted into the fructose 1,6 biphosphate molecules. When the glucose molecules, it gets converted into the glucose 6 phosphate, then 1 ATP is used in the conversion. When the fructose molecule, fructose 6 phosphate, get converted into the fructose 1,6 biphosphate, then 1 ATP is used. Now this fructose 1,6 biphosphate, in the presence of aldolase enzyme, it gets converted the dihydroxyacetone phosphate or phosphoglycerol aldehyde, PGAL. Okay, phosphoglyceraldehyde. This phosphoglyceraldehyde, in the presence of phosphate isomerase dihydroxyacetone phosphate, it gets converted into the phosphoglyceraldehyde, and this phosphoglyceraldehyde, okay, finally in the presence of phosphoglyceric hydrogenase enzyme, what happens? It gets converted into the 1,3-biphosphoglyceric acid. Now 1,3-biphosphoglyceric acid, it is a reduction process. Okay, it is a reduction process. Now the 1,3-phosphoglyceric acid, in the presence of phosphoglyceric kinase, what happens? It gets converted into the 3-phosphoglyceric acid. 3-phosphoglyceric acid, in the presence of phosphoglyceromutase enzyme, converts into the 2-phosphoglyceric acid. Now 2-phosphoglyceric acid, in the presence of enolase enzyme, converts into the phosphoenol pyruvic acid. Phosphoenol pyruvic acid finally gets converted into the pyruvic acid in the presence of pyruvate kinase enzyme. So in the glycolysis, there are the three criteria. First is the middle way of the conversion. On this side, in the red color, what happens? The name of enzyme has given, and on this side, into the blue color, what happens about the production of ADP and ATP occur, means consumption of ATP and production of ADP occur. If we see the total structure, total steps, there are total 10 steps: first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 8, 9 and 10. Okay, so these are the 10 steps. Among these 10 steps, what happens? Glucose finally gets converted. Okay, it gets converted into the pyruvic acid. So student, one thing is become clear. As you know, the glycolysis, it occur into the cytoplasm of the cell. So no need of the oxygen occur into the glycolysis. Here one thing is also common. Glycolysis of the both aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration both is same, and both occur into the cytoplasm of the cell. Now we see about the total production of the ATP and consumption of ATP. Total production of ATP and consumption of ATP, when we see it in the first step, what happens? Means in the first step, what happens? Consumption of ATP occur, 1 ATP consumed when the glucose gets converted into the glucose 6-phosphate. Now second and third step, on the third step, what happens? The consumption of 1 ATP occur when the fructose 6-phosphate gets converted into the fructose 1,6-biphosphate molecule. Now the fourth, fifth, sixth step. Okay, this one is the fifth step. Fourth, fifth and sixth step. What happens? And the sixth step means the reduction of the phosphoglyceraldehyde occur, where the NAD plus molecules get converted into the NADH2. Okay, NADH2, 2 NADH2 molecules, these are produced on the sixth step. Now the 2 ADP molecules, it is produced, and the 2 ATP molecules on the seventh step. Okay, so on seventh step, here the production of ATP molecules occur, and this one is on the sixth step, 2 NADH2 molecules occur, and 7, 8, 9 and 10th step. Okay, on the 10th step, what happens? Production of the 2 ATP molecules occur. So 2 ATP molecules here, 2 ATP molecules here, and 1 ATP is consumed here. Okay, 1 ATP consumed here, 1 ATP produced here. So what happens? Means the 2 ATP, this 1 ATP, which ATP? 1 ATP here, 1 ATP here, 2 ATP is consumed, and here total 4 ATP is produced after the glycolysis. So net gain of ATP after the glycolysis, that is the 2 ATP. How much ATP? 2 ATP. Okay, 2 ATP that is produced. Okay, that is produced after the glycolysis, right? So net gain of ATP, that is the 2 ATP. That is the 2 ATP. 2 ATP is produced after the glycolysis process. 2 ATP. Okay, 2 ATP that is produced, okay, after the glycolysis process. So net gain of ATP, that is the 2 ATP after the end of reaction into the glycolysis. So it becomes very clear. In the NEET examination, what happens? The question generally comes, okay, from the steps. What are the steps where the ATP is produced? The first step, Remember that first step, third step, seventh step, and 10th step ATP and production and consumption occur. This upper two steps, this one from here to here, okay, from here to here. These are known as the consumption phase and these are known as the payoff phase of the glycolysis. इसको हम बोलते हैं consumption phase. क्या बोलते हैं इसको? Consumption phase. These are known as the consumption phase and this one is known as the payoff phase. So consumption phase, that is a very important. Okay, into the consumption phase, ATP consumption occur and into the payoff phase, what happens? ATP production occur. Alright, so 6, 7 and 10th step, they are the payoff phase and first and third step of the glycolysis, they are the consumption phase of the glycolysis. Now students, it become clear into this one diagram. Okay, glycolysis that takes place into the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay, and the total production of ATP occur, net gain of ATP occur, that is the 2 ATP. 4 ATP is produced. Overall, from the 4 ATP, 2 ATP is consumed, so net gain of ATP occur 2 ATP. Now the pyruvic acid, which is produced into the glycolysis, it does not directly enter into the mitochondria, but it goes into the mitochondria through a reaction that is known as the link reaction. So what is the meaning of link reaction? Link reaction is also known as the pyruvate oxidation or acetylation process. What is the definition of link reaction? Conversion of pyruvic acid into the acetyl coenzyme A is called the acetylation. It occurs into the cytoplasm and the enzyme which involves into the acetylation, that are the 5 cofactors required: thiamine pyrophosphate, flavin adenine dinucleotide, coenzyme A, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, and lipoate enzyme. 1 NADS is reduced is formed during conversion. It contains the 3 enzymes: pyruvate dehydrogenase, dihydrolipoacetylase, and dihydrolipodehydrogenase, means E1, E2, E3. What happens into this one? The pyruvic acid molecule, which is produced from the glycolysis, okay, it is the 3 carbon sugar. So the 2 molecules of pyruvic acid are produced, and these pyruvic acid molecules, they enter into the mitochondria through the acetylation process. Here the reduction process takes place. Pyruvic acid molecules, it get reduced into the NADH2, and coenzyme A bind with the pyruvic acid to form the acetyl coenzyme A, and decarboxylation process takes place. Here the enzyme pyruvic acid decarboxylase carboxylase enzyme occur, and finally here what happens? The 2 CO2 is produced. So total molecules are produced into the decarboxylation process, that is the 2 CO2 molecules. यहाँ पे 2 CO2 molecules निकलेंगे और 2 NADH2. It is produced during the carboxylation process. So link reaction, that is also very important. Once again, the link reaction is also known as acetylation process. It occurs into the cytoplasm, and finally acetyl coenzyme is produced. This coenzyme finally, it what happens, gets separated after the entry of acetyl coenzyme into the mitochondria. Now the next reaction, the Krebs cycle occur. Acetyl coenzyme A, which is produced into the link reaction, that enter into the mitochondria and participate into the cycle or Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle, it was given by the scientist Sir Hans Krebs, and he was given the criteria about the means pyruvic acid pathway. This acetyl coenzyme A, which is produced after the link reaction, it enter into the cycle and binds with the oxaloacetic acid, which is a 4 carbon compound. This one is the 4 carbon compound. When the 4 carbon compound bind with the acetyl coenzyme A 2 carbon compound, it forms the citric acid molecule, which is the stable molecule. So this cycle is also known as the citric acid cycle. Citric acid cycles, it again get converted into the isocitric acid. Isocitric acid, then what happens? It get reduced after decarboxylation from the alpha ketoglutaric acid. Alpha ketoglutaric acid again entered into the decarboxylation process and reduction process. It forms the succinyl coenzyme A, then gets converted into the succinic acid. Succinic again reduced into the fumaric acid into the malic acid. Reaction also form the oxaloacetic acid. So here what happens? After this process, the 2 Krebs cycle required for the single glucose molecules, and at the 3 places sorry, 4 places reduction takes place. And first place, that is the when isocitric acid convert into the alpha ketogluteric acid, then once time reduction takes place, NADH2 is produced. Second time, when the alpha ketogluteric acid gets converted into the succinyl coenzyme A, then again reduction takes place. Okay, and what happens? Then succinyl coenzyme A gets converted into the succinic acid. Here, the GTP production, which is similar to the ATP, that is also produced. Now, succinic acid, it gets converted into the fumaric acid. Here, the reduction also takes place, and that reduction is carried by the that FAD gets converted into S2. Finally, what happens when the malic acid converts into the azelaic acid, then also reduction takes place and NADH2 molecule is produced. So, if we see about the whole Krebs cycle, that is also known as the citric acid cycle, places, okay, at the 3 places where these 3 places means the 3 places where means sorry 2 places carbon dioxide produced, and at the 3 places Na2 is produced, at the 1 place FADH2 is produced, at the 1 place GTP is produced. These are the overall reaction of the Krebs cycle. For this Krebs cycle, important cycle, what happens? Sir Hans Krebs, he was awarded Nobel Prize to giving the cycle or giving the pathway of the respiration. Now see the citric acid cycle, that is very famous cycle, and finally the produce means which produce what is produced NAD and FAD, which is produced, that enter into the electron transport system, which is finally found at the cristae of the mitochondria. What happens into the electron transport system? In the electron transport system, NADH2 and FAD, NADH2 and FADH2 which are produced, they are gets converted into the NAD and FAD, and finally from the ATP, after the combination of phosphate molecule, ATP is produced. Finally, what happens? Oxygen molecule, it combines with the hydrogen, which is released from the NADH2 and FADH2, it forms the water molecule. Now see, here the overall reaction occurs about the electron transport system. In the electron transport system, okay, what happens? The cytochrome pigments are found. What are the cytochromes? These cytochromes, they are very much important molecules. Cytochromes, okay, cytochromes are very important molecules. They are the iron containing compounds, and they are 5 in number: cytochrome B, cytochrome C, cytochrome A, cytochrome A3. Okay, cytochrome B, cytochrome C, cytochrome A, and A3. Okay, so here the molecules, they are the many molecules, and these cytochrome molecules, what happens? They help into the means electron transport system process. Now see, I got about the information when the any substrate molecule, what happens? See here, cytochrome A, cytochrome B, C1, C, A, and A3. These are the 5. Here the 5 molecules of the cytochrome, and they help into the means cytochrome B, cytochrome C1, cytochrome C, cytochrome A, cytochrome A3. These are the 5 cytochromes molecules which participate into the electron transport system. What happens? The NAD and FAD, which is produced inside the reaction, it get oxidized by the means cytochromes. These cytochromes, they are the iron containing compounds. They are gets converted into the ferrous to the ferric acid, and ferric acid to the ferrous acid. During this conversion, what happens? The ATP is produced. When the NAD gets converted into the NAD2, okay, or NADH2 gets converted into the NAD. See here, the NADH2, it gets converted into the NADH2, it gets converted into the NAD. Then the ATP is produced from the ATP. When the FAD gets converted into the FADH2, hydrogen release, and these hydrogen molecules, it helps into the oxidation and reduction process of the means coenzyme, quinone coenzyme. This quinone coenzyme finally released to the electrons, and that electron is received by the cytochrome B1. This cytochrome B1, then from the 3 plus, okay, means from the ferric form, it gets converted into the ferrous form, and again the electron which is released, that is received by the cytochrome C1. First cytochrome C1 again gets converted into the means ferric form. Then so one by one, what happens? means the 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus. Means here what happens, the electron received by the B1 it transported to the C1 from the C to A and from the A to AC, and finally that electron is received by the oxygen molecule and get convert hydrogen which is released from the FADS2 and NADS2, it form the water. So here the water molecule formation occur. Okay, water molecule is formed. So this is the whole about the electron transport system. And finally what happens means NADS2 and FADS2 they gets converted into the means water molecule and ATP is produced. ATP is produced. This ATP here the three steps of ATP occur, three places of ATP occurs. When NADS2 gets converted into the NAD, then the ATP molecule is produced. When the electron transfer from the cytochrome B to C1, then the ATP molecule is produced. When the electron transported from the cytochrome A to AC, then the ATP molecule is produced. So there are three steps of the ATP production. First step, second step, and third step. If we count the number of the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, total 7 steps occur according to this diagram, which is known as the electron transport system or oxidative phosphorylation, and finally water molecule is produced. This water molecule, okay, that is the produce which regulate the energy formation. What is the meaning of this one? Electron transport system, it occurs into the rhythmic manner, and when the energy is produced, it never damages to the cell wall. Okay, so due to the means continuous sequence wise, one by one production of ATP, it does not damage to the cell, and finally what happens, the whole electron that is consumed and gets converted into the energy. So this is about the means electron transport system, right? Now the students, at the end of reaction, when the electron transport system takes place, then what happens? Here the calculation of total ATP occurs. Calculation, if we calculate the total ATP, then what happens? The glucose molecules after the glycolysis, it produces to the 2 NADH2, okay, 2 NADH. This 2 NADH2 and 2 ATP are produced. Then the glycolysis is get converts into the pyruvic acid, 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Now these 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, what happens? They enter into the link reaction. 2 carbon dioxide is produced. From the link reaction, acetyl coenzyme two chains occur, 2 acetyl coenzyme, then the Krebs cycle occur. So NADH2, 2 NADH here, 2 NADH here, and 6 NADH here. Okay. Finally, they enter into the electron transport system, and through the electron transport system, 34 ATP is produced, and here 2 ATP here and 2 ATP here. So total 38 ATP is produced into the reaction. Now 6 O2 molecules and 6 H2O molecules are produced. 2 FADS2 that is also involved into the reaction, okay, and form to the means at the end of reaction what happens? Total 2 ATP here, 2 ATP here, and 34 ATP here. What happens? Finally 38 ATP is produced in the respiration process. That ATP is available for us for the various process. Now what is the respiratory quotient? That is the very important topic. Respiratory quotient means what happens when we respire. After intake of oxygen means the production, what? Production of the carbon dioxide. The ratio of production of carbon dioxide and the oxygen, that is known as the respiratory quotient. What happens into the respiratory quotient? The respiratory quotient, okay, within the specific time, the ratio of quantity of carbon produced to the quantity of oxygen consumed is known as the respiratory quotient. RQ equal to CO2 released upon O2 consumed. The function of respiratory quotient, okay, function of respiratory quotient. The function of respiratory quotient, that is the to the means here about this one. Calculate the quantity of oxygen consumed and quantity of carbon dioxide released by applying the RQ. It represents the oxidation reaction of the various kind of foods or substance and reflect the metabolic rate of an organism. The RQ of the most animal at rest is in the range of 0.8 to 0.9. The human RQ is about 0.85. It is a very important topic here about the human. Okay, the human respiratory quotient, that is the 0.85 into the normal condition. But what happens about the means processing of the respiratory quotient? Okay, in the respiratory quotient, what happens when we see different types of the RQ has given. First type RQ, if it is less than 1, then it is known as the aerobic respiration. If RQ is equal to the 1, aerobic respiration. If RQ is more than the 1, that is known as the anaerobic respiration. Low value of RQ, it indicates that aerobic respiration is being carried out. Plants absorb CO2 to carry out the photosynthesis, and animal utilize carbon element to manufacture calcareous cell. High value of the RQ more than 1 indicate that anaerobic respiration is being carried out. Conversion of carbohydrate into the fats for the hibernation and process of large quantity of the food for the storage occur. So this is about the types of respiration on the basis of RQ. Respiratory quotient for the common food. If you see the common food, then what happens? Many common food has given, and about this common food has the different types of the RQ that has given. For the glucose or carbohydrate, it is the 1. For the fats or pumptic acid, it is the 0.696. It is lump sum 7. And for the protein, it is 0.8. 0.8. Okay. So it depends. RQ depends on the types of food. Okay. For the tripumptin, it is 0.7 less than the unity, and for the triolene, it is the 0.7 less than the unity. So here it is a very important question for the respiratory question. Now the difference between the aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. The aerobic respiration, it occurs in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic respiration, it occurs in the absence of oxygen. Respiratory substance glucose is completely oxidized. It is a partially oxidized. Products are the carbon dioxide, water, and the 36 ATP molecules. Here not the 36, okay, 38 ATP molecules that is produced. Okay, so here the thing is common. Here you cut this one. Okay, not the 36. Total 38 ATP molecules are produced. How much? 38 ATP molecules. Right? 38 ATP molecules are produced, and products are ethanol and alcoholic acid, and 2 ATP molecules are produced. Energy is released in the large quantity. Energy is released into the lesser quantity. Cytoplasm and mitochondria are the sites of breakdown. Only the cytoplasm is the site of breakdown. So this is the difference between the aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Okay. Now significance of aerobic respiration. It is the characteristic energy releasing and energy supplying catabolic process in all the aerobic organism. It occurs only in those cells which contains mitochondria into the cell cytoplasm. It involves the stepwise intercellular oxidation of the organic molecules in the CO2 and H2O, and the energy. It conserves the 40% of energy and release in the oxidation of the substrate. Thus, aerobic respiration shows the 40% efficiency. The conserved energy ATP is made available into the cellular activities. Most important significance of aerobic respiration is that the biologically usable chemical energy ATP is released in the installment at various steps during the process. As a result, it can be properly and completely used for cellular activities without any wastage. Many intermediate compounds of the process are useful for the other metabolic process in the cells, and similarly, a number of intermediate compounds of this process are important industrially and economically. So this is about the means whole process of the respiration. And student, I feel that you understand better the second part of respiration, which is the cellular respiration. Once again, I repeat this one process, the cellular respiration. It occurs into the 4 steps. First step is the glycolysis. Second one is the link reaction. Third one is the Krebs cycle, and fourth one last, that is the electron transport system. This whole process, it takes place inside the cell. So it is known as the cellular respiration, internal respiration, and oxygen is necessary for this one process. As I had mentioned, upper 3 steps means glycolysis, link reaction, and citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. It does not require to the oxygen, only the oxygen required at the electron transport system level. Into the glycolysis, once I also recapitalize in the glycolysis, what happens? The 2 phases occur. First one is the consumption phase. Second one is the payoff phase. In the consumption phase, ATP is used, and into the payoff phase, ATP is produced. The total 10 steps occur into the glycolysis from the pyruvic acid, from the glucose to the pyruvic acid, and the ATP consumption occur at the first step and the third step, while the ATP production occur at the seventh step and the 10th step. On the sixth step, what happens? 2 NADH2 molecule is produced, which participate into the Krebs cycle. Now, the link reaction, it occurs in the matrix of mitochondria, and after the link reaction, what happens? The two molecules of pyruvic acid, which is the 3-carbon sugar, they are produced after the glycolysis. They enter into the matrix of mitochondria, and after combining with the coenzyme A, they produce to the acetyl coenzyme A, which is also the 2-carbon sugar. Now, means the pyruvic acid is 3-carbon sugar and acetyl coenzyme is 2-carbon sugar. So the decarboxylation process takes place. During the decarboxylation, 2 carbon dioxide molecule is reduced, produced. After then, the acetyl coenzyme enter into the citric acid cycles and release the coenzyme. Acetyl 2-carbon sugar bind with the oxaloacetic acid, participate into the Krebs cycle. So total 4 times, okay, reduction process occur. 3 times NADH2 molecules are produced and 1 time FADH2 molecule is produced. Finally, at the end of Krebs cycle, 2 ATP is produced. All the FADH2, NADH2 which are produced into the reaction, they finally enter into the electron transport system, and after the stepwise manner of the electron transport system, that electron transported by the cytochrome molecule, okay, cytochrome B, cytochrome C1, cytochrome C, A and A3. So these are the correct sequence of the cytochrome, okay, B, C1, C, A and A3, and the stepwise manner ATP is produced. So finally, at the end of electron transport system, total 34 ATP molecules are produced, and these 34 molecules of ATP, they finally, when we calculate, total 38 ATP molecule is produced at the end of reaction. So this is whole about the respiration. As I feel that a student understand each and everything. If any doubt, then what happens? We can confirm, we can see into the next classes. Thanks.